Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Nawa po ang lahat ay nasa mabuting kalagayan. My task today is to discuss the continuation of our report about the brain-based learning and other new understanding. So the first topic is emotions are critical to patterning. So according to Goldman, 1988, he describes emotional intelligence as the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves, and for managing emotions well in ourselves and in our relationship. So we have different emotional intelligence. We have different approach on how to deal with others. So in addition, emotional intelligence describes abilities which are distinct from but work alongside what can be called academic intelligence. So look at this example. If an individual is in state of emotional intelligence, an emotional unrest for whatever reason, it is likely that he will not be able to function effectively as a learner. Obviously, a sensitive teacher will take account of the emotional climate in a classroom. But more importantly, a teacher should ensure that the nature of the classroom and the nature of teaching approaches should not lead to emotional unrest in a class or an individual. So very challenging siya sa time ngayon ng remote learning, di ba? Hindi natin nakikita yung mga bata physically. The way we deliver the words, the way we choose our words, kailangan careful. Baka matamaan yung emotions nila. Sabi nga, iba't iba ang emotional intelligence ng mga tao, what more yung mga bata pa. So, it also affects yung academic intelligence or yung may EQ, the emotional intelligence na kailangan nating bigyang consideration. Okay? The next topic is every brain simultaneously perceives and creates parts and wholes. So left brain or right brain research is only the beginning of understanding the way the brain divides learning tasks. Look at the examples here between verbal and visual, analytical and global, logical and creative. So sabi, yung left daw, pag yun yung brain na nagpa-function, lalo na yung mga left-handed daw, they are good at analytical sa math, Tapos yung right brain naman, yung sa kanilang sa communication, sa language, yun yung nagfa-function sa kanila. In some classrooms, cross-disciplinary approaches are taken which attempt to embrace the different facets of brain structure and functions. So, calling to sa atin sa teachers to become more creative in giving activities, especially dun sa mga adult learners kasi iba na yung functions and yung brain structure nila. Among other things, then can be seen as an attempt to recognize and work with the interaction of both left and right hemisphere. So, kino-consider nila yung mga functions ng mga brain ng isang tao, ng isang estudyante. So an example of this might be using art in math lessons or music to help the understanding of a scientific principle. So ginagamit yung left and right brain. So the next topic is learning involves both focus attention and peripheral attention. So according to Ruggiero 2000, the brain takes information directly but is also able to give attention to what have been called the fringe thoughts. So what is the fringe thoughts? It refers to as peripheral signals. They came in 1997, can be very potent and can even obscure what should be the main focus of the teaching. So, we are capable of both paying attention to the main point of reference in teaching situation and at the same time being aware of many of the peripheral backgrounds even which may present. So, this has an implication for the classroom environment. Sometimes and peripheral events can take over from the main event in terms of holding a learner's attention. O, diba? Isang challenge din sa mga elementary students, yung attention span ng mga learners ng elementary. It has also implication for hidden messages transmitted, sometimes inadvertently by teachers via the medium of body language. Okay? So, yung mga non-verbal and verbal communication, kailangan natin siyang i-involve. Next is learning always involves conscious and unconscious process. So, there are two processes here in learning, the conscious and unconscious process. It is far more difficult to assess the depth of understanding that may have developed during the completion of a learning task. Yes, honestly speaking, pinakamahirap yan, lalo na yung nagtuturo sa elementary. There is an enormous amount of unconscious processing taking place in our brains, not just at times of learning, but also the time and more so when there is conscious effort being made and conscious mental activity is being undertaken. Okay? The creation of connections between ideas and growth in conceptual understanding can take time. It also often time for reflection. Reflection is very important on how will we assess our learning. Reflection is needed to allow for ideas to sink in. This reflection time is a time when ideas can be revisited and reconsidered. Okay? So, talaga naman, totoo po yun na once we reflect na makikita natin, no? Sabi nga, reflection on newly covered work is a time when sometimes with encouragement, connections can be made and some of the important unconscious processing can be brought to the surface. So that is for learning always involve conscious and unconscious. Next is we have at least two ways of organizing memory. So, Kane and Kane in 1994 referred to O'Keefe and Needles in 1978 model that there are two types of temporary. These are taxons or local and spatial or autobiographical. When we say taxon or local memory is motivated by rewards and punishments. Recall is not related directly to specific links, but often unrelated information can be accessed in what might appear to be a random fashion. So dito tinatalakay yung mga internal and external motivations na ginagawa sa isang student or learner. The second memory, according to them, is spatial and autobiographical memory. Is much more related to the links and association between events, particularly when personal experiences is involved. That is why performance task in the K-12 curriculum is important. Especially yung nagsulat sila ng mga naranasan nila after nilang gawin yon, or yung mga hands-on training. So yun yung isa sa types ng memory. In this type of learning, no, yung pinakamababa sa Bloom's taxonomy is the recall. Can be instant and is more reliant on the logic of links formed at the time of event in question. So, di ba yung mga kinder or yung mga elementary schools, yung mga K to 3, ang kanilang mga tanong muna doon ay yung mga law questions, yung mga recall, who is the author of the story, who are the characters, what is the lesson of the story. So yung mga what, where, when, yun po muna yung kanilang ginagawa, no? These two types of memory help learners to record their experiences. So through recall, through these two memory, talagang makikita natin yung learning kasi nire-record na nila yung mga experiences nila. So, sabi nga, no, these two types of memory help learners to record their experiences as important and unimportant details are categorized and stored differently. Teachers can attend to both types of memory by organizing activities into meaningful parts, placing ideas in context, and incorporating a range of learning styles, and most especially the multiple intelligences into classroom practice. So talaga namang mapapa-flexible ang mga teachers sa panahon ngayon in doing this two types of memory para lang ma-adapt nila, ma-record nila, makuha nila, and especially ma-impose sa kanila yung learning. Next is learning is developmental. Okay? Hindi instant na natuto na yung bata. Chibel and Diamond, 1986, gave insight into the way that the brain is able to grow and produce more physical connections than had previously been thought possible. It had been thought that the brain structure was fixed early in the developmental process and that the growth of new physical pathways was not a real possibility. They describe this ability to grow expansive networks of nervous pathways and connection as dendritic fireworks. And what is dendrites? The physical but microscopic branches of nerves in the brain which control the movement of electrical nervous impulses have the ability to grow incredibly rapidly and in many different directions, creating new and complex patterns of neutral connections. So, hindi siya yung instant na ito agad yung alam ng bata. So, it takes process. It takes, learning is a developmental. May mga, kung ano yung pag-grow ng kanyang brain, ganun din yung nalalaman niya habang tumatanda. Complex learning is enhanced by challenging and inhibited by threat. So, Piaget and Vygotsky, that learning will not proceed if the material offered is either too complex or too simple. There is a brain-based explanation. However, if teaching is pitched too low, the brain-based community tells us that the learners will be understimulated. If teaching as the precise level of learner, they work in what has been called a comfort zone, where little new learning will take place. Okay? The notion of threat has links to the emotional state of the learner. It is fairly well known that when in a state of stress, included perhaps by perceived threats of one sort or another, we fail to function effectively. So, sabi nga, pag yung theory ni Piaget and Vygotsky, yung kay Vygotsky, di ba, the zone of proximal development, little by little, step by step, kailangan ganun yung approach na ibinibigay natin sa bata. Hindi pwedeng in grade 1, higher English na or higher math na yung ibibigay, no? Okay? Kailangan little, step by step, maibigay natin sa bata. Kasi baka pag ibinigay natin yung mga higher math, it takes na mas stress yung bata, hindi na siya mag-aral. So, sabi nga, kinakailangan, no, hindi lang dun sa comfort zone niya, nag-grow siya. Kailangan ma-explore din niya yung mga bagay-bagay na nakikita niya sa paligid. Okay? So, every brain is uniquely organized. Okay? Kaya nga, we have a different learning style, we have multiple intelligences, we have different approaches in teaching. No? According to Levin 2002, he described a myth of laziness. What is the myth of laziness? It is referring to the perception that a teacher or other adult may form a child based on observed problems with a child's attitude in teaching situation. Nung first year of teaching ko, I see to it na yung learners ko, kilala ko sila na with the help of diagnostic test, kung paano ko sila bibigyan ng mga exercises, ng mga activities, and then with the help of na rin ng mga interviews, kung paano natin makikita o paano natin matatransform yung isang learner. This can be seen to refer to multiple intelligence theory or to notions of cognitive and learning preference, diba? Sabi nga, may yun, sa multiple intelligence na nakaangkla, yung brain is uniquely organized. Kasi mayroon na magaling sa language, may magaling sa logic, may magaling sa sports, may magaling sa arts, diba? Sabi nga, bakit siya alam niya yon? Bakit ako hindi ko alam yon? Bakit siya kaya niya yon? Bakit ako hindi ko kaya yon? So, dyan masasabi na talagang brain is uniquely organized. Talagang masasabi natin may pagka-religious aspect din kung paano binuo ng Diyos yung ating utak. No? The brain-based learner closes down under threat, learns via peripheral events, has a unique brain, learns through both conscious and unconscious process, has various types of memory, and learns best when content is embedded in experience based on the Literacy Organization 2004. The brain-based learner talaga depende kung paano na form yung kanyang utak. Kane and K97 conclude by saying that optimizing the use of the human brain means using the brain's infinite capacity to make connections and understanding what conditions maximize this process. Okay, so talagang the connections with others, kung paano tayo salamuha, paano tayo magbitaw ng mga salita, paano natin sinusulat yung mga gusto natin isulat. Talagang brain ang human brain ang gumagalaw para dyan. So, there are three conditions, no? There are three interactive and mutually supportive elements that should be present in order for complex learning to take place. The first one is an optimal state of mind that we call relaxed alertness, consisting of low threat and high challenge. So, sabi nga sa mga activities, example is an activity for the students na step 1, basic, going to complex, no, para hindi mabigla hindi drastic yung pagtanggap ng bata. The second one is orchestrated immersion of the learner in multiple, complex, and authentic experience. So as a teacher, use that in our performance task na you need to perform this. For example, if you are the SK chairman of your barangay, what would you perform? What will be your actions? No? Parang pinapasok ko sila doon sa sitwasyon na kailangan nilang matutunan. The last is the regular, which is active processing of experience as the basis for making meaning. So sabi nga, experience is the best teacher. Wherein all our experiences serve as our lesson, serve as our learning every day. So, every day, no, yung student, kahit sa remote learning tayo, nakikita nila na may learning silang natatanggap na paunti-unti kasi this is the first batch of remote learning. Yung experience nila kung paano mag-present ng slide deck with the use of different platforms, it takes also a learning for them. No, lesson yun sa kanila na they keep on trying na matutunan nila yun. So, yun yung sa active processing. Okay? So, I hope you learned something in my report, and I think this is my last slide. So, before I end my report, allow me to share this quote from Albert Einstein. It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. Indeed, talagang we need to survive the formal education now to survive the everyday challenges of our lives. So for that, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening also, and I hope you learned something in my present.